Saving Private Chelach. The Prosecutor's General Office has chosen an easy way out with the case of the Arkan-Kirgen border checkpoint massacre, placing the blame squarely on the 19-year-old Vladislav Chelach. Kremlin deadlock. Putin visits Nazarbayev. A long-time friendship blooms again. Judgment Days 10. The verdict on the case of 37 oilmen is announced in Aktau. Exhibition pictures. Kazakhstan's contemporary culture, an explosive mix of art and politics. Hello, I am your host Asylbek Abdulov, and you are watching Vlast KZ on KpLus. Another region in Kazakhstan has become internationally infamous last week. First Zhanaozen and now Arkan-Kirgen is in the center of attention. Bodies of 13 soldiers were found in the burnt-down border outpost in the mountains of the Almaty region. Another 2 border guards and a huntsman were also found dead later on. The sole survivor of the massacre, Vladislav Chelach, was detained last week and confessed to the murders. However, no one except for the investigators believe in the sincerity of his testimonies.
This interview with the mother of the border guard Vladislav Chelach appeared online 8 days after the tragedy at the frontier outpost Arkan-Kirgen. My son can't hurt a fly. He almost faints at the sight of blood. Svetlana Chelach was relieved at first to find out her son was the sole survivor and the 15-man unit serving at the outpost. But later she learned that Vladislav confessed to killing his colleagues and setting the barracks on fire. The young soldier is now facing from 10 years to life in prison. I was told they found my son alive, but I should be ready for some bad news, as he's facing a life sentence after what he did. In Svetlana's words, her son had no reason to be vengeful. Vladislav's attitude towards his service on the border was tinged with a dose of boyish romanticism, and the letters he wrote home were all positive. Vladislav's grandfather also doesn't believe his 19-year-old grandson could shoot his colleagues in cold blood. I was told the investigators are only speculating about all the details to find out exactly what happened. But what questions can be there when the president himself said it was a terrorist attack, as it clearly was the work of professionals? One person couldn't have done that. God kept him alive, although I don't know at what cost. Nursultan Nazarbayev labeled the emergency at the Chinese border being a terrorist act on June 1st, and the searches for the missing soldier continued for 3 more days. On June 4th, according to preliminary information, Chelach met the search detachment while in a stupor. 2 hours later, the Minister of Interior said patrolman had recovered and was giving testimony. The information that the soldier confessed appeared on June 6 from the governor's sources. Next day, at a press conference, Prosecutor General Press Secretary Nurdaulet Suyndikov issued an official version of the events at the outpost. In Chelach's words, internal conflicts and an inexplicable state of clouded consciousness served as motives. He denies having accomplices. The prosecution announced that alcohol or other intoxicating or sleep-inducing substances that were rumored to be found in the guards' and watchmen's blood were in fact not present. All the guards' weapons except for Makarov pistol confiscated from Vladislav were found at the burnt premises. It is noteworthy that all victims were unarmed. Moreover, in Chelach's words, some guards who woke up did not take the weapon pointing at them seriously. After committing the crime, Chelach shot the assault rifle from random positions to cover up, dropped cartridges all over the barracks, then dosed everything with kerosene and set the premises on fire. Suyndikov makes no sense. According to their version, Chelach first killed the watchman, took the assault rifle, then murdered the cook. All of that happened outside, so the 2 bodies already couldn't have led them to believe Chelach was joking. But then he went inside where there were 10 people. So he shoots and kills, say 2-3 men, then draws at another 2-3 soldiers who supposedly still think he's playing, and then they drop dead and bleed all over as a prank. They do really think we're idiots, aren't they? An entire campaign in defense of Vladislav Chelach was launched on social networks. His page contains sad short poems about death, hinting at the soldiers' suicidal tendencies. The pale and misery sun, the cold and dead sunrise, the heart beats no more. I am dead, I am no longer here. But the internet community is as united as ever, believing the 19-year-old is made a scapegoat of another official lie. You can't take down 13 people with one automatic rifle magazine, even at point blank. You have to be very cold-blooded to keep shooting one waking guard after another, some half asleep and in shock. Change the magazine and continue the massacre. Remember how one famous dissident killed himself with 3 shots, and now we have a 22-year-old killed 14 soldiers. Someone said today that we should take it easy. This was a political order, not by China or someone else, but by our own primitive politicians. This was done to play dirty tricks on the nation's leader since a VIP was in the area at the time. Hence, this was a planned diversion. They wanted to frame this person to cause international discussions of the incident and the lack of any restraints. We never knew the whole truth. We either knew half-truths or bits of it. The soldier internationalist Sergei Pashevich also raises questions how one soldier who served for 6 months could have murdered 15 people, many of whom were more experienced fighters. Even if the official account is truthful, the Afghan war veteran doesn't understand how a psychologically unstable person was allowed to serve in the elite forces. We never pay attention to those who we serve with. If we do the simple thing right now and conduct a checkup of this detachment, ask the commander for a notebook containing conversations with his personnel, I doubt he will have one, even though he should. The commander should conduct monthly talks with each subordinate. Meanwhile, the dead border guards are paid tribute to as the heroes fallen while protecting the motherland. A nationwide mourning was announced a week after the tragedy. A public funeral service of 19-year-old Denis Rey was held in Pavlodar Lyceum. Ceremonial troops bid him farewell. Every generation picks the best to serve. May they rest in peace. Despite detention of the primary suspect, searches are still conducted in the Almaty region. The installed roadblocks in the Alakol district were used to inspect all incoming traffic. Every once in a while, motorcades with flashes flew by with members of commission under the leadership of a special military prosecutor inside. They refused to make any comments. We wanted to pass on the wishes of our leadership. While investigation is underway, we cannot comment on anything.
Last week, President Nursultan Nazarbayev met with the heads of the lower house parliamentary groups. The country's representative body consists of representatives of 3 political parties, 3 fractions which peacefully coexist with one another. The facade of democracy is made up of 83 MPs from the ruling Nur Otan, 8 from Akjol, and 7 from the People's Communist Party. The head of state described the lower house of parliament as a good school of democracy. Evidently, the president sees good democracy only if it's controllable. During the meeting, the president and the MPs discussed how the parliament can help the development of small and mid-sized business, boost the employment and well-being of the population. But the most important issue was raised later. The president suddenly remembered about the control functions of the parliament and asked the usually placid MPs to demand higher accountability from the executive branch. Exactly 1 day later, the president's initiative was supported by his daughter and MP Dariga Nazarbayeva during the parliamentary discussion of the Audit Committee report in the execution of the 2011 state budget. People who are allegedly held liable get off with only a slight shock and a change of chair. I believe ministers and governors should be held liable for the implementation of the budget spending plan. I am sure that our meeting will be spotlighted in the news in a positive way. Therefore, I want to ask the Minister of Communications and Information to allow reporters to cover our discussion objectively. The MPs also spoke of the current unequal partnership between the parliament and the government within the power system. Supposedly, the time has come for the speaker to raise a question of the parliament's status and the expansion of its powers. It seems that Nazarbayeva will continue to position herself as an active MP and a person to watch for by government officials. Evidently, she's inspired not only by the president's ascension towards the parliament, but also by something greater. For instance, by a promise that she's destined not only for the role of parliamentary prima, although it was not the first promise of such kind. The term president's daughter, which began to mean not only the family relation but also a professional occupation, first emerged in Russia in the 90s. Tatiana Dyachenko, now Yumasheva, was appointed advisor to her father Boris Yeltsin and served as a bridge between the liberal wing of the Kremlin and the first Russian president, a fact that in many ways helped him win a second term in office. Last week, Boris Yeltsin's widow opened a photo exhibition in Astana dedicated to the late first president of Russia. At the same time, his successor, Vladimir Putin, recently elected for a third term, met with Nursultan Nazarbayev, who has unlimited presidential terms. With the gypsy song playing in the background, Naina Yeltsina and her daughter Tatiana walk into the Dome Hall of Nazarbayev's museum. The women of Boris Yeltsin's family arrived in Kazakhstan on a special occasion to open a photo exhibition dedicated to the memory of the first Russian president. A collection of 300 photographs shows Yeltsin in a complete new way during official meetings, as well as intimate family settings. In some, the president is a jolly fellow. In others, he looks thoughtful and even tragic. The works are devoted to different periods of Boris Yeltsin's life, from youth to his last days. This exhibition is dedicated to his 80th birthday, and we took it to many cities in Russia and abroad. Now people of Kazakhstan will be able to see it as well. Out of all photographs of Boris Yeltsin posing with various politicians, the majority are with Nursultan Nazarbayev. The friendly relations between the two first presidents have never been a secret. Yeltsin used to adorn his Kazakh friend not only with books but also orders and decorations. The highest award of the Russian Federation, the Order of St. Andrew, was given to Nazarbayev in 1998. Apparently, it's one of those cases when such friendship is passed on from generation to generation, along with the president's chair. Vladimir Putin arrived in Astana on the same day with the widow of the first Russian president. The head of state was welcomed by Prime Minister Karim Masimov. Driving through the streets of the capital, the long-awaited guest was accompanied by an impressive escort, even causing a traffic jam, especially near the president's administration. Although Nazarbayev did not meet Putin at the airport, he greeted him right outside his residence. The nation's leader personally walked the Russian president arm in arm to a separate room, where he proceeded to take a light jibe at his colleague. Dear Vladimir, I am glad that despite such a difficult schedule, when you had to practically live in a plane for the last week, you still found the time to stop by. A somewhat resentful smile of Nursultan Nazarbayev is understandable. Kazakhstan's president invited Putin to Astana way back on May 25th, intending to celebrate the 20th anniversary of signing the Cooperation and Friendship Treaty between the two states. Russians gave their consent, and for a while Kazakh diplomats proudly emphasized that Putin's first international visit as the new head of state will be to Astana. Alas, the visit was cancelled at the last moment. Instead of Astana, Russian president chose Minsk, Belarus. From there, he went to Germany and then France. Later, he visited Uzbekistan and took part in the SCO summit in China. The Russian leader made it to Kazakhstan only while on his way back home. By this point, the solemnity of the moment had been long gone. Vladimir Putin seems to understand the awkwardness of the situation. I didn't just stop by to see you. I would like to say that it is a great pleasure for me to visit you at your invitation. In fact, I consider this as my duty. Even though Putin got away with Europe and China, it's not that easy with Uzbekistan. In the past, Kazakhstan was considered Russia's top partner in Asia. However, by paying a visit to Tashkent before Astana, Putin set his priorities according to some experts. There's plenty of room left to guess, though. Did Uzbekistan indeed become very important, as it is the most populated country in the region and borders with Afghanistan? Or was this simply another attempt to make Astana politically jealous? For 2 years, Kazakhstan was the most important country for Russia, and then Uzbekistan took its place. But later they switched back again, and this has been going on for a while now. It is clear that this is not just rhetorics, but actual geopolitical games. These said games are perhaps something Putin has to endure. Hectic flights across the continent are still better than a visit to Washington. Obviously, no one would keep silent over there and ask the Russian president some uncomfortable questions. For instance, about the rallies, dissenters, and violent dispersals. All of these matters are easily avoided and even hand-waved during the meetings with CIS leaders. Therefore, Putin can steadily restore his shaken internal image while in present comfortable environment. According to political scientist Rasul Jumaliyev, the best and surefire way to do this is by touching on the favorite subject of many Russians, the revival of the United Empire.
Он сказал, буквально цитирую: «Мы рано или поздно призовем к ответственности тех, кто допустил».
He said we will sooner or later call to account those who committed the destruction of Russia's territorial integrity. But if you look at the years of independence since 1991, when Russia separated from the Soviet Union, it did not lose any of its territorial integrity. It is clear to anyone that Putin was actually referring to the territorial value of the Soviet Union.
Территориальную целостность Советского Союза.
Kazakhstan, Russia, and Belarus are coming close to integration with the customs union and the Eurasian economic space. Kyrgyzstan is also expected to join the neighbors soon. Our strategic direction is to reach the Russia-Kazakhstan-Kyrgyzstan Accord. We are quite open about it. Perhaps a dozen countries will join the alliance eventually, but quite obviously not everyone will get equal treatment, says economist Mukhtar Tayjan. Such development is possible only with equal partnerships, but any post-USSR unions will be inevitably dominated by Russia. Heads of parties were told that this could lead to the loss of independence and sovereignty, because the theory of international relations says that political integration is inevitable if there is close economic integration in place. But if experts understand the inevitability of foreign dependence, why doesn't the head of state? And if he does, why risk everything on siding with Russia? The former presidential candidate and ardent anti-communist Salim Oten has his own explanation. He believes the Kremlin has some dirt on the Kazakh leader, while Nazarbayev himself does not trust his own people. Therefore, Nazarbayev is looking for escape routes. Russia is his backup plan. If something uncontrollable happens in Kazakhstan, he will flee to Russia. Meanwhile, during their meeting in Astana, the two leaders continued to discuss the possibility of Eurasian integration and signed a number of agreements, including the joint use of Baikonur space launch facility. In addition to launches, Kazakhstan also wants to take part in their creation, and whether the concept of joint use also covers the potential income is still unclear. After all, Russia is unlikely to give up any of its space money.
В аренду Байконура мы получаем $115 миллионов в год.
We get $115 million a year for the lease of Baikonur. However, the money has never been transferred, as it always comes in the form of supplies, for instance, for the railway, etc. At the same time, one space seat costs $60 million a year, and there are several launches every year.
Россия запускает спутник на МКС, да? Вот место одного космонавта стоит $60 миллионов.
Vladimir Putin, apparently pleased with the results of the talks, calls for Kazakh ministers with a hand gesture, while Nursultan Nazarbayev approaches Russian delegates personally. The presidents say their goodbyes and wish to shortly meet again. The next rendezvous will take place in the fall in Pavlodar at another forum for inter-regional cooperation. Next on Vlast KZ. Judgment Days 10. The verdict on the case of 37 oilmen is announced in Aktau. Exhibition pictures. Kazakhstan's contemporary culture, an explosive mix of art and politics.
Любовь невозможна, это предчувствие гражданской войны. На эти темы мы поговорим через
We will return after a short break.
Vlast KZ.
Главные события в Казахстане. Достоверные факты. Эксклюзивные комментарии. Читайте в Казахстане информационно-аналитический портал «Республика». Чтобы обойти блокировки, воспользуйтесь доменом respublicas.info. Вы окажетесь на так называемом прокси-портале. Специально разработанные канадскими специалистами по интернет-технологиям, прокси-порталы помогают пользователям получать информацию в тех странах, где блокируют интернет-ресурсы. В Китае, Иране, в Казахстане. Вы принимаете условия использования системы и попадаете на страницу информационно-аналитического портала «Республика». Материалы интернет-портала также доступны пользователям всемирной сети Facebook. facebook.com/respublica.kaz. Если вы хотите поделиться информацией, вам есть что рассказать, звоните в редакцию «Республики». Наши телефоны в Казахстане +7 727 273 92 95, в Москве +7 495 621 87 03.
Новости Казахстана на казахском языке смотрите в 21:00 и далее каждый нечетный час. Новости Казахстана на русском языке в 22:00 и далее каждый четный час. Новости Казахстана на английском языке смотрите в 16:30, 17:30, 18:30 и 19:30 со вторника по субботу. Время Астаны. Изготовление и размещение рекламы на канале KplusTV.
Last week, Karaganda miners bid their final farewells to the labor union leader Tahir Muhamedjanov. On June 5th, his body was found lying in a pool of blood in his rented apartment. Forensic experts reported that the death was caused by heart failure. Miners' family lost their reliable civil rights defender.
Шахтерская семья потеряла своего надежного защитника. Соратники в официальную версию не верят.
The activist's colleagues do not believe in the official theory and recall that Tahir had been recently given death threats by unidentified individuals who urged him to abandon his work. Just a week before his death, Tahir was involved in the important meeting with the Zhezkazgan miners of Kazakhmys Corporation, and according to his colleagues, this could have been the main motive for eliminating the union leader. 2 years ago, Muhamedjanov's garage with a car inside was blown up. His colleagues recall that the activist was going to spend the night in the garage at that time, but apparently was saved by destiny. His friends and colleagues uploaded a video chronicle of Tahir Muhamedjanov's life on the internet.
Я, Мухамедзянов Тахир Нариманович, являюсь заместителем председателя общественного объединения «Шахтерская семья». Вот вы знаете, господин чиновник, вы всю жизнь нам обещаете, только одни обещания, ничего не исполняется. В пятницу, в субботу вечером, после 9 вечера, ко мне стали ломиться в дверь. Я открыл 4 полицейских и 2 женщины в белых халатах.
понедельник судья Аралбай Нагашбаев огласил приговоры по делу.
On Monday, the judge Aralbay Naqshbayev announced a verdict on the case of Zhanaozen riots. 13 out of 37 were sent to jail. During the 2-month trial, many defendants claimed they were tortured by investigators, but the court pursued their own interest and did not take this fact into account.
Но суд во внимание это не принял и гнул свою линию.
A large number of people gathered to hear the verdict on the case of 37 oil workers. However, not everyone was able to get inside the courtroom. The youth center Arman, which temporarily served as the location, was packed. Defendants were met with ovations. The judge Aralbay Naqshbayev took time in reading out his ruling. The official was suffering from the heat and a tickling throat. It began on a good note. The court found Yertay Mukhanov, Janis Bapilov and Mel Sarabayev innocent and released them in the room. 5 people were sentenced to 2 and 3 years, but were pardoned on the spot. 16 more received suspended sentences from 2 to 3 years. That marked the end of the humane part of the conviction. Saktaganov Talgat is found guilty as per Part 1, Article 241, and is sentenced to 4 years of imprisonment. Tulitaeva Rosa is found guilty as per Part 1, Article 241. She is sentenced to 7 years of a minimum security prison. Stop reading it. It's a rigged trial. This is all a lie. They didn't kill anyone. There is no proof. What are they doing? He has 2 daughters. The trial is rigged. Such was the reaction of the defendants' families upon hearing the verdict. The courtroom drowned in tears and women's cries. Almost no one could hear the judge in all the commotion. Calm down, stop yelling, you won't get anywhere. In an attempt to shout over the courtroom noise, the judge continued to read out the sentence. 12 people were convicted to 3 to 7 years of imprisonment. Roza Tulitaeva received the longest sentence. Maksat Dasmagambetov, Naren Jalgasynov and Kanat Jusibayev got 6 years each. Shabdan Utkilov got 5, Talgat Sakdaganov 4, and the rest were convicted to 3 years. Judge Nagashibayev had to retreat from the courtroom before finishing the verdict. Meanwhile, some women tried to make their way to their loved ones to see them and talk to them for the last time. They, however, were forced out of the courtroom. You imprisoned him already. Let me at least look at him. They are all convicted under the same article. Half were released and the other half jailed. That's not right. Their guilt wasn't proven. Oil workers didn't kill anyone. Compare them to 5 policemen. My heart aches. I have 5 children. One of them is disabled. But the court says that he has 2 children. Why? Even though our husbands are oil workers, we live modestly. Let them come see us at our homes. What they were striking for 8 months straight. To loot and burn, they were standing for their rights. We need to do everything in our power, appear more often in the media, appeal to international organizations. Nothing will be solved until Nazarbayev dies. All these months the accused and their families were hoping for an acquittal. After all, after visiting Zhanozend late last year, Nazarbayev himself said that the responsibility for the unrests in December lies on the oil company management. Now many in Aktau and Zhanozend want to personally ask the president what the oil workers were sentenced for. Nazarbayev doesn't know anything he is being reported to. You won't be allowed to see him, even if I take you there. I will die at his door if I need to. Take me there. There is nothing more we can do here. Public activists don't deny they were certain the judge would not acquit everyone, but even skeptics consider the end sentence too harsh. We didn't expect the court to acquit all participants of December events, but they stepped over the line with this decision. All the people upset and dissatisfied with the conviction are blaming the president. This is a political case. The authorities pulled regular people into politics. The wife of scholar and dissident Arken Ouaktin understands and empathizes with the oil workers' families like no one else. 25 years ago, her husband was jailed on charges of organizing mass disorders. More than anyone, Dr. Arken Rahmetova is concerned for Roza Tulitaeva, who leaves 3 underage children behind as orphans. The authorities treated Roza harshly, but you can see she's a brave and resolute. People cried when the sentence was announced. She calmed them down and cheered them up. I believe she will be released in 2-3 years. She will go down in history as a fighter, a female warrior, a Baatir of the 21st century. In light of the latest events, Dr. Hanapal looked at the monument for independence differently. She sees a Zhanozend boy waiting for his father's release from prison in the barefooted child. The elder man sitting in the background is the elder who can't find the words to comfort his grandchild. Toy cars are the only distraction for little Sultanbek from questions about his father. When he's tired of playing, he will pester his mother, asking her, "Where is daddy?" His father, Baurjan Nepes, was sentenced to 3 years. Nepes was raised in an orphanage and has 4 children, 2 of his own and 2 adopted. Prior to his arrest, Baurjan was awarded a certificate from the city authorities for being an exemplary father. This is such a tragedy. They are making orphaned children cry. Their tears will never be forgotten. We will condemn them. My husband was on strike for 8 months and sat in detention for 6. If he was guilty, I would understand. But he's not guilty of anything. Why was he given 3 years? The murderous policemen were given 5 each, and they should have been given 15. The law should be the same for all of us. The Abdurrahmanovs' family receives guests every day. They share the parents' joy about their son's release and pardon. But Yesyen, who got infected with TB while in jail, still doesn't understand why he was convicted in the first place. 3 or 4 months ago, I was in a clinic. Dr. Aragbayeva said I was healthy and my lungs were clean. On the 16th, I was transferred to a temporary detention facility where it all happened. We were dosed with cold water and allowed only to walk in our underwear. The exact number of people who developed serious illnesses and injuries that led to disabilities is yet to be counted. 17 victims of the December 2011 violence and 13 convicted in June 2012 make 30 people who paid with their lives and freedoms for the Zhanaozen beautification efforts carried out by the authorities in the last 6 months. At the same time, military patrols have also become a usual part of the town's life in that time.
In conclusion, a story about the exhibition of Kazakhstan's contemporary art, which opened this week in Perm, Russia. It is particularly newsworthy for the participation of the Kazakhstan artist and dissenter Kanat Ibragimov.
Авангардист с ярко выраженной гражданской позицией, наряду с театральным режиссером Булатом Атабаевым.
The avant-gardist with a strong civil position, along with theater director Bulat Atabayev, recently became prominent figures and spokesmen of the Kazakhstan's protest culture by joining in an uneven battle against the autocracy which rejects personal liberty.
Еще и выразителями культуры протеста, вступив в неравный бой с автократией, которая не приемлет личной свободы.
The Kazakh art show in the Russian city of Perm is called The Face of a Bride. The works of 22 most distinguished artists of Kazakhstan were presented to the public during the White Nights Festival. Notably, Kanat Ibragimov, Yerbal Miltbekov, Said Atabekov, Almagul Minilbaeva are better known in the West and in Russia than in Kazakhstan. In this sense, modern Kazakh art is indeed like a bride with a veil removed from her face. The political situation in Kazakhstan does not contribute to support and development of Kazakh modern art. Unlike Perm and Moscow, unfortunately, there is not even a single institution that could deal with contemporary art in Almaty. This situation is phenomenal. Almaty is a metropolitan area, so in some ways this exhibition is a challenge to the fact that contemporary art is not shown there. Along with the search for identity and artistic reflection on how something foreign and new weaves into the Kazakh homegrown, there are also quite specifically formulated questions. Political art, something that has returned to the forefront after a 30-year absence. Kanat Ibragimov brought his Love is Impossible to Perm. Instead of the face of a bride, there are skulls of gold. Paintings are accompanied with a video of shooting and finishing off protesters in Zhanaozen. The love between the authorities and their people is impossible beyond this point of no return, says Ibragimov.
Лицо невесты, лицо Казахстана оказалось.
The real face of Kazakhstan appears to be very obscene, cankered with wounds and mean looks. It is a symbol of unrequited love, and in my case it is represented by grinning skulls with ruined hopes for a peaceful solution to a conflict in Kazakhstan. Love is impossible is a premonition of a civil war in Kazakhstan, and God forbid for this to happen. Ibragimov backed his works for the exhibition in extreme conditions. After 2 15-day arrests for taking part in the dissenters' rallies in Almaty, the avant-gardist was facing the third. Now he's expressing his protest from Russia. The face of a bride is a symbol of delirium of Kazakh ideology and politics. When Nursultan Nazarbayev prioritized the economy before the politics, it did not work out. We had let it rain in Zhanaozen. Our activists are persecuted. There are death squads everywhere, as well as artists who side with authorities. Kanat Ibragimov is not known for carefully choosing words. He is always explicit and sharp. Paintings and performances are his personal artistic jihad. He arrived in Perm from Moscow, where he took part in the Occupy Abay. Dissenters of Kazakhstan met with fellow Russian protesters Navalny, Yashin, Kasparov, and others who introduced the protest art to the masses. One of the participants of this trip, dissenter Lukpan Akhmedyarov, posted the status update on his Facebook page upon returning home. At only 4 degrees outside, there is an intensity of political emotions in Moscow. At 29, it's rather an Arctic prairie in Almaty in political terms. Gary Kasparov recalled that initially the Strategy 31 rallies gathered 200 and 300 people, which is certainly peanuts for multi-million Moscow. So when he found out that we managed to gather 100 people in Uralsk, he was simply amazed. He said the protest movement has only started to emerge in Uralsk with such a small population, and this indeed is good news. Reflecting at the Abay monument in his hometown Uralsk, Lukpan Akhmedyarov says he will continue to take risks. A month ago he was brutally assaulted and now says he will always stay on the path of dissenters, since other paths will lead the country to a dead end. He has a Pharaoh syndrome, so now there are groups of authorities lining up to become his affiliates, Kulibayev and Musin for instance, who are interested in undermining the situation in the country to the limit. The only way these unpopular politicians can reach people is with the same promise once used by Vladimir Putin. Back in the day, Putin appealed to the people in the midst of the war in Chechnya, saying he will provide them with security in exchange of their freedom. Another dissenter, theater director Bolat Atabayev, promised to fight for his freedom with artistic imagination and civil persistence. This week, he made a public statement addressed to the National Security Committee, which initiated a criminal case against him on charges of inciting social hatred. In response, Atabayev vowed to turn the possible trial into a farce. Someone has to expose this rottenness, show the dark side of life. I perceive the role of art, the role of theater, and what I do in general as a strengthening of society's immune system. On August 28th, I need to fly to Germany to receive the Goethe Prize, and it is very likely that I won't be allowed to do so. Although while Germans communicate with me, they realize that my phones are tapped, so perhaps they will not ignore this. This interview with Atabayev was made in Almaty amidst the remains of the contemporary art exhibition of the Arbat Fest. The Almaty event was synchronized with the exhibit opening in Perm, with the organizers trying to create a common relevant environment. However, if the exhibition in a small Russian town was presented at a single conceptual site, in Almaty it was scattered throughout the entire city. The situation with the actual art in Kazakhstan is almost identical to the protest sentiment. The key here is to keep participation down.
You
were watching Vlast KZ on K+. Trends, highlights, and personalities of the past week.
Всего вам доброго и до новых встреч.